Julian, a hero who once triumphed over the Demon King in another world, found himself back in his original dimension, summoned by a goddess to save her crumbling realm. He'd spent 20 years there, yet in his own world, not a second had passed. Upon his return, all memories of his 2-decade adventure vanished. But the goddess, far from being stingy, bestowed upon him a fragment of godly power, its meaning shrouded in mystical jargon. With little explanation, he was unceremoniously shoved back. Julian woke up believing it was just another ordinary day. A flood of messages from his manager revealed he was in hot water. Skipping breakfast, he raced through the streets like his life depended on it, only to face his fuming manager's wrath over his lateness. Head bowed, he took the heat, feeling like any other disillusioned corporate slave struggling with overdue rent. He desperately needed more part-time jobs to stay afloat. If only he had awakened earlier, things might have been different. Just as this thought crossed his mind, a system window flashed before him. He'd unlocked a unique, broken trait known as Skill Master. Julian had finally awakened. It had been 5 years since augmented reality, like something out of a fantasy novel, began transforming the world. Fields teeming with new resources had popped up across the earth, becoming the new focal point of global affairs. Awakened individuals, called users, were granted powers to conquer and explore these monster-dominated fields. Even menial tasks within these fields could bring in substantial income, making user a coveted profession. It was a risky life, stepping into the unknown, but the rewards were tempting, offering more honey than danger. Of course, not all users struck it rich. Some awakened with top-tier unique traits immediately, while others weren't so lucky. At the pinnacle of this new world was the #1 ranked user, Muhammad Al, the first to hit level 70, wielding an SS-grade unique trait called Dragon Speech. One day, Muhammad Al uploaded a video to his official YouTube channel, its intriguing title drawing millions of clicks. The video showcased an insane display of power that mesmerized everyone. This kind of magic was a mage's dream, instantly recognizable to anyone who had read a fantasy novel. The spell Muhammad used, Meteor Rain, was a destructive force capable of wiping out countless lives in an instant. Viewers were left speechless, never imagining such magnificent power. The A-grade field Muhammad annihilated in seconds was nearly impossible to solo, even for a level 70 user. The meteors obliterated everything, including city-destroying monsters, leaving everyone stunned. But what truly shocked viewers was the video's conclusion. Muhammad threw down an open challenge to all users. He promised to give a rare artifact, the Elemental Ring, the only publicly known SS-grade artifact, a relic everyone dreamed of owning, to anyone who could demonstrate magic more spectacular than his SS-grade Meteor Rain. In a cafeteria, 2 users discussed the challenge. They were disappointed, believing Muhammad had set an impossibly high bar. The woman, annoyed, thought it was a trap. Who could possess an SS-grade trait? And even if they did, they'd never get the Elemental Ring unless Muhammad personally approved their strength. Given the challenge's impossible height, he clearly had no intention of giving it away. It was just a flex. The video spread like wildfire, becoming the hottest topic across all news channels. Muhammad's challenge seemed insurmountable, one no one could possibly match. That is, until our boy showed up. As Julian stood in a field, he casually flicked his finger, and immediately, meteors descended from the sky, engulfing everything in flames. The meteor shower was so devastating that everything was obliterated. After causing such destruction, Julian casually gave a thumbs up, silently thanking Muhammad Al for showing him such an amazing skill. Naturally, everyone watching was absolutely boggled. Now for another round of lore about awakening and unique traits. When users awaken, they typically receive one unique trait. A unique trait essentially enhances the effects of certain skills, and is often thought of like a class in a game. Some of the most well-known unique traits revealed to the world are Dragon Speech at the top, which helps make a mage more powerful than a dragon. The second is Miracle, a trait capable of granting healing powers said to even revive the dead. Then comes Regeneration, which turns someone into an unstoppable tank who can regrow limbs. Lastly, there is Lethal Strike that transforms a user into a warrior who can defeat any enemy. But here's the twist. There's no mention anywhere of a trait called Skill Master, which is the one Julian just happened to awaken. After some deep digging online, he found barely any details on it. When evaluating unique traits, the first thing to consider is the grade. Generally, the higher the grade, the better the effects and the more subtraits it has. Grades range from F to SS. When Julian checked his trait, he found it was an unknown EX grade. He then looked at his stats, which were kind of underwhelming to say the least. Naturally, he was bummed to see how low they were. You see, a high-grade trait is supposed to come with a stat boost, so it's strange that Julian's stats were so low. Barely anyone gets such poor stats with a high-grade trait. He checked his subtraits, and so far there were only 2. Again, it was rather disappointing, as he had expected more. At this point, Julian was just confused with no solid details about his trait, but it seemed like he was about to get some clarification soon enough. The next system prompt gave him a tutorial quest, telling him to copy a skill. Once he activated the skill, he would earn 20 SP. However, there's a catch. Copied skills are automatically deleted as soon as midnight strikes. Well, that quest panel was unexpected. What's even more unexpected is the fact that in order to copy someone's skill, he would have to go out into the fields just to watch users in action. And that, quite frankly, given his abysmal stats, sounded like a suicide mission. Still, he didn't have much of a choice. He needed to find a skill to copy and finish the quest. Then an idea clicked in his mind. He remembered Muhammad Al, who had demonstrated the meteor rain skill. As soon as he watched that broadcast, the system displayed all the juicy details about the skill. When the system prompted him to copy the skill, Julian was shocked. He hadn't expected to be able to simply copy a skill just by watching a video from the comfort of his home. And just like that, Julian made his way onto all the TV news channels after winning that open challenge. Seeing his face plastered across the news, Muhammad cracked a smile. His secretary, however, wasn't sure if giving away the elemental ring like this was such a good idea. It seemed that Muhammad wasn't thinking much about the ring itself. He was more fascinated by the fact that the skill he had obtained only a few weeks ago was now being used by someone else. The secretary argued that there were plenty of skills similar to Meteor Rain, but Muhammad emphasized the coincidence. Not only was the skill our boy acquired SS grade, but it also had the exact same name. The secretary was still not convinced, pointing out that they hadn't verified that it was actually SS grade. It was possible that this was all a well-staged display of power. Her words failed to sway Muhammad. He was pretty sure that this skill was at least SS grade with a unique trait to boot. He then suggested she deliver a business card along with the ring, explaining that he wanted to practice caution and wouldn't deliver the ring personally. He also expressed his desire to become friends with Julian in the future and wanted this message to be delivered along with the ring. A while later, we find our maniac looping his own uploaded broadcast like it's a new religion. The video was blowing up, and it was only natural the dude started going bonkers. He was practically drunk on his own hype. While he was busy basking in his fleeting fame, a little girl at the counter was clearly dying for his attention. But he was way too zoned out to even acknowledge her presence. Eventually, her father snapped. The man was clearly pissed off seeing this particular cashier slacking off on the job. Once Julian finished serving the customers, he slumped into his chair and let out a long, defeated sigh. It seemed like he wasn't getting anything after completing that challenge, let alone an SS grade item. Just a few days ago, he was a nobody, useless, invisible, incapable of doing a damn thing. But ever since awakening his trait, he was finally starting to believe in himself a little. If only he could make enough money to live comfortably forever, maybe even become as strong as Muhammad Al and bathe in the adoration of the masses. He was still daydreaming when a sudden notification yanked him back. It was a comment coming directly from Muhammad Al under his video. The legend himself just promised to hand him the reward he deserved for winning the challenge. The internet promptly lost its mind. The big cheese finally dropped the ball, and everyone was losing it. Even Julian couldn't believe it. Cut to the next scene. He was sitting stiff as a board next to a secretary who was there to deliver the promised gift. She even chauffeured him home in a luxury car like it was totally normal. The dude was still wearing the same expression he had earlier. Half shock, half, what the hell is my life? Back in his room, Julian stared at the ring. He still couldn't tell if this was a dream or a bug in the system. Then the system helpfully displayed the stats of the elemental ring, and it was stacked. Every single stat was nuts, like S-tier loot box levels of crazy. That's when Julian suddenly snapped back to reality. Now wasn't the time to sit around gawking. This ring gave him a fighting chance to start training for real. Hunting in the fields was the only way to grind up his level 1 stats. But there was a catch, though. He didn't even have money for proper armor. Sure, his viral video brought in tons of revenue, but he couldn't withdraw any of it without verifying his identity, And he really didn't want to do that. So he sat down, racked his brain, and came up with a loophole. Instead of risking his life inside a field, he'd just set up shop outside and offer emergency healing services. Healing, after all, was lucrative. Just patching people up at a field entrance earned hundreds of thousands of won. Even the cocky hunters who trash-talked healers wouldn't dare enter without one station nearby. Julian had copied a C-grade healing skill strong enough to heal fractures, amputations, and status ailments up to F grade. He could earn 200,000 won for fractures. Amputations cost 500,000 won, and status ailments cost 700,000 won. Not bad for a day's work. So, the next morning, Julian camped outside the Deerank swamp field near Seoul Grand Park. He didn't pick a low-tier spot on purpose. It's just that all the prime locations were already snatched up. With no customers in sight, he scrolled on his phone, thinking he might bring something fun next time to kill the boredom. At least here, he wouldn't get trampled by monsters. It was a safe zone after all, or so he thought. Suddenly, a guy charged toward him at breakneck speed, carrying a severely injured woman. The man was terrifying, like a storm in human form. Julian totally froze up, forgetting to even breathe at that moment. The man growled at him to start healing in a commanding tone. But Julian didn't like his tone one bit. It reminded him of those entitled jerks back at the convenience store, the ones who thought they owned the place. And while this healing skill might not even be his originally, it was C-grade with solid options. No way he was wasting it on some random ass who couldn't ask nicely. He was about to pop off when the man offered a fat stack of 200,000 won up front. Julian immediately switched to customer service mode with his respect mode activated. Soon enough, regret kicked in when he took in the sight of that woman's severed arm and felt his guts twist. The man set the limb in place and demanded the healing start. Julian forced himself to look. The injury was so gruesome, it was like the air itself recoiled. He wasn't even sure if his C-grade healing would be enough, but he couldn't be so sure without even trying. So, he activated Light of Recovery. After serving his customers, Julian was back home, sprawled across his bed with his soul half dead. While he made good money, he had to use his healing skill 3 times, which drained him dry. Without the elemental ring, it would have been impossible. What worried him more was how that party even got wrecked so badly in the first place. The only conclusion was that fields were dangerous as hell, and he better stay away. Still, he was grateful. At least this job beat rotting behind a counter, dealing with stingy Karens who acted like spending 1,001 gave them a license to scream. Now with this gig, he could probably retire his whole bloodline and chill till the world ends. Since he had enough cash to survive for a while, it was time to focus on earning SP and finally leveling up. Suddenly, a tutorial quest popped up, telling him to raise the level of the subtrait, namely passive income. Passive income was one of the key methods for acquiring SP, which was crucial for the growth of his trait skill master. He should also keep in mind that raising the level of his subtrait, known as passive income, was a top priority for growth. Now Julian finally understood why subtraits also had levels. It turned out that he could harness their potential even more by leveling them up with SP. It took 100 SP to level up the passive income subtrait. His passive income skill granted him 10 SP after every 24 hours. Funnily enough, if he spent this 100 SP to upgrade his passive income subtrait, he'd get 100 SP back as a quest completion reward. Basically, it was a win-win situation. Plus, he'd unlock another new subtrait once the quest was completed. Now, it was a no-brainer that he needed to upgrade his passive income subtrait. After checking the total SP he had, he realized he'd need to wait another 3 days to gather enough SP points to complete the quest. During these 3 days, he decided to use his time experimenting by copying new skill combinations and such. Just to sweeten the deal, the room service staff arrived with all the delicious food he ordered. With the spread laid out in front of him, he dug in while watching other users with unique traits. He was especially focused on S-grade or higher skills, the kind that almost only existed in Legends by now. While copying these rare skills was exciting, the sad truth was that they disappeared as soon as midnight strikes. To solve this problem, he needed to record all these videos on his phone so he could watch them whenever he wanted. He still couldn't get over how Muhammad Al appeared like an angel out of nowhere, showing off his SS grade skill, which Julian then copied. Though he still needed to figure out how to keep these copied skills for an extended period of time. Perhaps there was a chance he could keep all these skills to himself if he upgraded his trait of skill master enough. He then decided to organize all the videos in a playlist, prioritizing which ones to use later and which ones to use right now. He made sure to add body-hardening traits. Another skill was teleportation, which sounded pretty cool. The list went on, and he added all the essentials. A while later, after binge-watching, he made sure to wipe off all the food as well. He was literally stuffed, his belly looking like an inflated helium balloon, ready to pop at any moment. He was feeling happy because he'd already secured his future by registering as a healer with the user association. With all the skills under his belt, his value as a user was bound to skyrocket. He could hardly wait for the day when all the hot busted chicks would fall over themselves for him. The next day, as he sat just outside the fields, that injured goddess from a few days ago came to him to express her gratitude. She was fully healed, showing the full extent of her abilities. But it seemed like this jackass didn't recognize her. When she asked if he actually didn't remember her, the crazy guy bluntly said no, as if he'd never seen her in his life. After all, this goddess of a lady was just too beautiful for someone like him. She then reminded him that a few days ago, her brother brought her here, and he was the one who healed her. Now that she mentioned it, Julian's memory quickly jogged, and he finally remembered that she was that damsel in distress with the busted hand. He legit thought she was the dude's girlfriend because he spent so much money on her, but turns out she was actually his sister. Moving on, the woman was glad that he finally recalled her, which made it easier for her to express her gratitude. If it weren't for him, she would have been pushing up daisies by now. She then asked if he was part of any party, to which Julian responded with a no for obvious reasons. She followed up with another question, wondering if he was part of some guild. Once again, Julian's response was the same. In this case, she invited him to join her party since she needed a temporary healer. Julian was startled by the unexpected invitation. Since he wasn't in the right shape to be in the fields yet, he decided to decline her offer. But the way this goddess was showing off her feminine side, this horny loser couldn't resist his urges and instantly accepted the proposal. Before their conversation could continue, they were both startled by the ear-piercing growl of an injured man, whining like a wuss he was. His companion was dragging this whiny fellow out of the fields who required instant healing. Julian simply ignored the lady, got to work, and tended to the injured guy right away. In no time, he got the man back to his former state, earning a well-deserved fat stash. Let's not forget about the promise he made to the lady to join her party. Since he was racking up enough money as it was, he didn't feel the need to join her party, especially since his level was too abysmal for roaming in the fields, so he awkwardly declined her offer again. The girl still tried to coax him, revealing they had an S-grade tank and an S-grade mage to back him up. She was pretty confident they could carry him out with no problem at all. Julian simply packed up his stuff and was on his way, still declining her proposal. The reason for his rejection was simple. He saw her come out half dead from a D-grade field just a while ago. So, there was no way in hell he wanted to face the same fate. Of course, he didn't say this out loud. He knew this was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to be recruited by such a hottie. But it looked like fate wasn't on his side, and he had to reject it, even though he didn't want to. Tears and money were the only things left behind as he ran off. The only thought on his mind was to quickly gather enough money and SP to become a golden spoon mage. Enjoying his new life of luxury, Julian discovered that he earned 10 SP points thanks to his passive income effect. Investing his points into upgrading the same skill, he spent 100 SP to unlock an upgraded variant of the passive income. Now he'd get 50 SP for free instead of 10 without even lifting a finger. Talk about living life. With that settled, he checked on the quest reward he gained. It netted him another 100 SP and granted him the ability to inherit the unique trait of whatever skill he copied. Now would be a good time to discuss the specific traits in this world, as they represent a player's tendency to use an ability. Normally, the players or users are allowed to use skills after acquiring them from skill books. That's a strict rule for all, but the potency of every skill differs based on the talent of the user. For example, if your average Joe had no innate traits, his fireball would pale in comparison to someone who has an affinity to flames. Because of this, mastering multiple skills is considered pointless, as without the original talents of the player, the skill is vastly underpowered. The only difference was the skill he copied from Muhammad from the video, but that's because it was the system's way of showing him how things worked. But with his new bestowal ability, any skills he copied would also inherit the traits of the original player. This meant his copied skill would match the output of the real one. However, he didn't get what the word random implied from all of this. So, he wanted to test out a few things to be certain of how his powers worked in detail. For now, he thought it was a good opportunity to exit his life of being a freelancing healer. Julian received a tutorial quest to hunt down monsters using his copied skill. This way, he could level up and upgrade better versions of the same ability. His quest demanded that he take down at least 20 monsters, and it was going to net him a total of 200 points for doing so. The sheer timing of it was way too coincidental, to the point our boy was wondering if some god was out there watching him and responding to his every demand. Anyway, since it was a hunting quest, he needed a skill suitable for the use. So he scrolled to a video demonstrating a fire skill and wondered if he should steal that for practice. He was out here stealing Sasuke Uchiha's most spammable jutsu. Julian didn't share high expectations and acted like he was trying stuff out for the fun of it. Initiating his copy skill, he obtained an E-ranked fireball. It was a pretty simple skill with a simple cost. Just like the system told him, he also obtained the ignition trait as a byproduct, allowing him access to a greater effect. Yeah, at this point he really thought he was being watched because he was practically getting stuff for free. Anyway, our boy stepped into the sheep farm entrance where the field entrance was located. He observed the dimensional gap and wondered if it was the division between field and reality. Julian decided to go all out and purchased equipment just to be safe. Entering the field, he welcomed his new life as a hunter instead of a shitty healer. Meanwhile, Julian ended up popular on the forum as the fire psycho who slaughtered low-level mobs. They saw him going crazy, killing monsters all on his own. So a bunch of greedy losers reached out to him and even tried inviting Julian to their guild. Our boy couldn't help but act nonchalant, reminding them that he'd already rejected an offer from a top-tier S-rank baddie, which was hilarious when you remember how he ran away with a face that screamed depression. Also, he didn't quite remember laughing while hunting down the monsters. Once again, it was quite funny because in the actual battle, he started giggling his ass off like a villain executing his enemies. Julian suddenly remembered that and thought that his excitement must have clearly gotten the better of him. Defeating the monsters earned him the SP points he needed and also reduced the usage cost of his copy skill. It was a good thing because Julian had been looking for something that could help him keep on hunting with the reduced costs. Browse the community forum, he learned about a raid post about an obsidian bear boss field. From the comments, they were expressing shock at how the fire psycho defeated the obsidian bear without any equipment while still being at a low level. At the same time, Julian reflected that he was only able to do that because he spammed fireballs and didn't require much else. An enlightenment hit him like Truck Kuan hitting Ice Guy protagonists. He remembered that he received a gift from the strongest ranked user, Muhammad, to whom he was still indebted for the ring. Let's go back a few days and see what became of the battle against the Obsidian Bear raid. The boss monster was going ballistic on them, causing the tanks to jump at the front and handle its rage. They wanted the mages to stay safe at the back in the meantime. Since our boy received a quest to defeat the boss monster, he was pretty happy about it, especially with the promise of earning 500 story points. The weird-looking obsidian bear was terrorizing the party until Julian gave its body a gentle tap from a fireball, doing massive amounts of damage. The party leader was shocked, immediately taking notice of the fire mage, who acted like it was no big deal. The enraged bear was continuously hit with fireballs until it was knocked down. The rest of the party was shocked, questioning if the fight was over. But to their horror, the obsidian bear roared loudly, unleashing its A-rank skill, which decreased all of their stats. The berserk state was a second state of this boss, despite the fact that they dealt heavy damage to it already. Unfortunately, the players were so weakened because of the debuff that they could barely stand in place. The obsidian bear then focused its wrath on attacking the group leader, who could barely defend with his sword, while the rest of his team was practically useless under the nerfs. All except for one, that is. The system granted Julian an additional quest to copy the boss's skill. And just for this demonstration, he was given a free copy slot to execute it immediately. Thanks to the system's built-in appraisal effect, he could also inspect the monster's skill before copying it. Details of the obsidian bear's roar were presented before his eyes, and he immediately activated the copying effect for it. Julian inherited the boss monster's skill, which came with an added nerf of randomly deleting an aspect of its ability. So, it removed the condition requiring 50% health and allowed him the full use of the rest of the effects. Julian was genuinely baffled that he could use the skill without any costs or conditions in place, making it no different from a hack. Knowing that the skill would be depleted by midnight, he made use of the opportunity and unleashed his own version of the Obsidian Bear's roar. Julian's usage of the Obsidian Bear's roar instantly stun-locked all of his companions in a state of decreasing stats. The group suspected that the bear let out another roar, when in reality it was actually our boy. Unfortunately, it turned all of their stats to trash only to reward Julian on his own, buffing all of his stats by 9. Now that was a hack. As for the cute-looking bear up ahead, our boy casually walked up to the furry beast, unafraid of anything in his path. Pointing a finger to the heavens with a smirk, this guy created a blazing gigantic fireball and then unleashed its wrath upon the bear that gave them so much trouble. The group was left completely flabbergasted by the sight of Julian destroying the Obsidian Bear. With the defeat of the field boss monster, our boy leveled up twice and also got to keep the copied skill. But this special occurrence only happened because of the tutorial quest showcasing him that he could copy skills from bosses as well. It rewarded him with a total of 700 SP points, too, which was amazing. As you can imagine, Julian was living the life with his new powers. Shortly after the defeat of the creature, his group roared in celebration, chanting how cool he looked taking care of the field boss all on his own. The scene reminded our hero of the time when he killed the demon lord in the foreign realm. The system absorbed the Obsidian Bear's soul and also increased our boy's stats. The whole soul thing was actually new to Julian, as he'd only heard of it until now. Let's discuss it in detail. Boss monsters are usually 10 levels higher than the level of an average field. This means if someone tries to use a high-level player to kill the boss for them, the field recognizes it and immediately causes the corpse to disappear. With the corpse gone, you can't obtain any valuable drops, which means that smuffing doesn't reward you with anything here. Now, the real reason players actually love to hunt down field bosses basically boils down to one simple fact, and that is they want a boss item to drop, which happened in our lucky case, as one of the dudes discovered the Obsidian Bear's drop. Item drops make the player's efforts worth it, and then the corpse of the boss they defeated is also sold for a pretty good price. But aside from that, our boy was geeking out over the fact that his strength stat was boosted. The best part about raid participation is that upon completion of the raid and the defeat of the boss, each of them gets a permanent stat increase. Julian's party was heads over heels for our boy for completing the raid so casually. They explicitly stated that he was the reason for their victory. The raid leader mentioned how he was fully expecting his group to suffer a ton of injuries right after the Obsidian Bear went berserk, but it's thanks to our boy's efforts that they won't have to worry about that anymore. Interacting with the status window, the party leader inspected the boss item that was dropped. Though it was valuable, it came with an activation condition requiring the player to be at least below 30% health, which also meant you're going to be standing on your last leg when it comes in handy. Anyway, the raid leader stated that the drop items would all be distributed according to the player association's judgment. However, one ugly dude wanted to buy the boss item on the spot and was ready to hand over 90% of the value in cash. The party members started murmuring about opportunists who only magically appeared whenever the boss item dropped. Their only objective was to collect special items, so they were infamously dubbed the boss item hunters. But in this case, since they were giving a fair price, it didn't seem like a bad thing. However, Julian was a bit skeptical and his bullshit detector was going crazy. He didn't get what these guys were aiming for. Anyway, one of the bodyguards opened the case to reveal the lump of money, confirming that they could process the payment at once. The sheer sight of the sparkling cash turned our boy into a gold digger who suddenly no longer cared about their intentions at all. The scene cut to Julian sitting in the same crappy field like he usually did. He was actually suffering through despair because he didn't even feel satisfied with earning 10 million won. This was because Julian had taken a fascination with a special piece of equipment called Rekta's leather armor set. Unfortunately, this thing cost a whopping 63 million won, enough to break our boy's heart. After learning that they only had 2 sets of the armor left in stock, he felt like he was suffering losses or living a poor life, when in reality, the dude had expensive taste. Anyway, Julian's scheming little mind was concentrated on hunting as much as possible for the time being. He opened the status window to access rewards for his tutorial quest. Luckily for him, he could access the boss's monster skills with this. But even still, the skill itself was risky to use because it required him to drop below 50% health at least. But that's fine because our boy had a lot more fun abusing his fire skill more than anything. With no customers bothering him at the moment, he decided to invest some of the points he saved to buff his stats further. Now, there were a bunch of options available to him. For example, taking the fantasy route, he could end up an incredible warrior. However, he wasn't in the mood to risk his life so hard in a place where danger was imminent every day. Noticing a shift in his magic power, he spent 500 points to enhance the copy skill, allowing him to gain an additional copy usage per day. This was pretty exciting news for him. The tutorial quest also pointed out that daily quests are the only surefire path to gain SP points. Receiving a sudden daily quest, he had a simple task of using his copy skill 2 times. It's a fairly easy way to guarantee 80 story points. This also made our boy curious because he was unsure what would happen in the case of copying the same skill twice. Watching a video, he decided to copy the Healing Light skill. After acquiring it, he wondered if the trait would be affected or not. So he decided to do the same again, but the system warned him that he had already copied this skill. Ignoring the system, the dude moved forward with it and copied the skill a second time, much to his amazement. Shortly after that, he updated the sign on his board, which now read that he was going to be selling healing alongside an experience buff of 5% for every 1 million won. This rare offer drew attention from many players as they gathered all around. Being the savvy businessman, he advertised his offer loud and clear. The people all around were shocked and questioned his words. After all, an experience point buff was completely unheard of. At first, they thought he was a scam artist who would steal their money and run away. But our boy was just waiting for them to swarm him with the sweet cash he was looking for. Suddenly, one mage came up to him. She lifted her hood, revealing herself to be the same S-rank baddie from earlier. As she teased him to join their party, seeing fine ass again, he was literally blinded by her mesmerizing looks. He told her that he was currently aiming to do some business, which caused her to teasingly remark that he was yet to acquire his first customer from the looks of it. That's why she was more than happy to experience his product as his first customer. Julian treated them like royalty and requested them to come in. With the activation of his newly acquired Healing Light ability, he bumped up their combat experience by 5%. Before leaving, she handed him her personal card and number, stating that she'd be expecting his call. They were dying for a good healer, and it seemed fine ass over here really had an eye for our boy with how obsessive she was. More importantly, she did him a generous favor by confirming to everyone about the legitimacy of his service. That caused an entire swarm of customers to rush in to get their hands on the same service. He was literally feeling filthy rich from people slapping bills on his face. While that was going on, let's go back and check up on Fine Ass and her brother. Her brother was a bit frustrated that she was being obsessive over a dude who didn't even have equipment. The mage reminded her dear sibling that their party was going to be unstoppable after this. The two of them were already good at playing their own parts. So, all they needed now was a reliable healer. And then came the fact that this guy could pull off experience buffs too. That was a jackpot if they could get him in. Even still, her brother had objections since they were dealing with a newbie. But she thought that was the best part about them noticing him early. Right now, not enough people in the world knew about Julian's talents, so it would be best for them to catch him the quickest. Having entered the dungeon, the S-rank mage unleashed her firestorm strike, mowing down a group of warrior lizards. She continued her talk from earlier, and had a feeling that someone like Julian had a bright future ahead of him as a warrior. With the millions acquired from his hot sale, our boy finally got his armor and was looking fly as hell with that outfit on. At the same time, he was in the mood to swing for passive income instead of direct income. So, he played with the system screen and learned that he could easily acquire 50 to 200 points daily at the default hour. This meant that even if he didn't do anything at all, his SP points would accumulate daily. Our boy was in the middle of calculating the cost of his SP skill required for skill copy level 3 until a bombshell dropped on him, and he realized that it was going to cost him a whopping 4,000 points to get to the next level. The good thing, daily quests gave plenty of these points, which meant at a set rate of acquiring 200 points a day, he got to wait about 49 days to get what he wanted. But for now, he was interested in raising his stats first since that took priority. So Julian thought heading for another field battle would be good. Also, he equipped his hoodie and recalled that he was publicly known as a healer. So now he was going to play the part of his hidden identity as a mage and keep using that. The scene cut to the field battle, but unfortunately, the place was located in muddy ground, ruining our boy's outfit. The F-rank field known as the Gorham Bay specialized in nullifying attackers and tanks. Julian wondered if the testing ground was mostly aimed at beginner-level awakeners. Of course, with the addition of a field limit, he was out here struggling to collect shitty boss souls. Recalling the warning he read from one of the community members online, he thought everything was going to be fine because nothing happened during the Obsidian Bear raid either. So what could go wrong? Am I right? All our boy wanted was to go home. But from the looks of these damn clowns just casually speaking to each other, every single nerve in his body was getting pissed off. One of the dudes came around to ask if he was really a guy or not, all because he inverted his name for the raid participation. It also made him wonder what became of the female side. Turns out the chicks were getting seduced by a blonde dude who clearly didn't know the right time and place for these things. At this point, Julian really regretted not checking his teammates out properly before coming on this shitty raid. The blonde dude casually told everyone that they should initiate the briefing session. But at this point, seeing him stick his nose in every girl's business, Julian wouldn't be surprised if this guy was dating the whole group. Anyway, the blonde clown expressed that their strategy was simple and didn't need more explaining, but he'd go over it once more. The boss of this field was called the Mudflat Crab and had the trait to get faster every time it was stunned with a debuff from the players. That crossed off the mage's debuff effects because it would only make the battle tougher as the boss monster would become stronger. The crab also had some self-inflicted debuffs applied, like being injured or bleeding, which meant it would get faster with time with too many injuries. The goal was to dismantle the bastard without really giving it many injuries because after a certain number of injuries, the boss exhibited a special effect. This alerted our boy until the knight went back to his flirty self as he flexed how he'd already defeated 8 boss monsters like these. So this should be cakewalk too. Anyway, Julian assessed the situation and wondered if the crab's ability to gain stats from the debuffs was its very own special skill. This was important information because it basically meant a debuff would be considered as a buff. So this skill might come in handy for him. At the same time, he was seriously annoyed by the dating scene going on and wondered if the dead weights in his team would be helpful or not. The field fight kicked off as the blonde warrior went on to slice and dice the creatures down. You may be wondering at this point that they're really good, but the hilarious part is they're out here flexing, killing bite-sized little clams, and acting high and mighty over it. The party was acting like they were taking down hordes of monsters when it was really just a few clams that could fit in their hands. Even Julian was questioning his own sanity, being a part of this group who thought it was doing so much after basically beating level 1 creepy crawlies. The blonde clown's confidence went out the window when spiky tentacles emerged from the ground, instantly causing this man to retreat away. Even though he was so confident about protecting his party and flexing earlier, since the boss monster in this stage only appeared after a set number of creatures had been killed, they were trying to take down as many beasts as possible. So they mowed down the centipede-like creatures with a rain of arrows. Julian hadn't even done anything so far, and he was kind of happy that they were holding up pretty well. The players here already possessed strong skills for an F-rank field, so he was anticipating the main boss monster to just come out already. Well, maybe he spoke too soon because one of the mudflat crab's mouth-like claws emerged from the ground and swallowed a monster whole. The group realized that the real raid was about to begin with the appearance of the mudflat crab, who appeared way larger than some of them expected. Since the boss monster was known for being limited in its movement, they were told to attack it in a linear fashion rather than going left or right. Meanwhile, our boy was pretty astonished observing the crab's actual skill details. He'd found himself a jackpot for a unique skill like this. Anyway, right after popping in the field, the boss monster exerted its terror and scared the crap out of these cowards. It was so funny how the crab was capable of changing directions and adjusting its motion, different from what the party's expectations were. Also, from the looks of it, Julian judged its special ability to be a permanent passive that increased stats upon more buffs or debuffs being applied. Once again, it made our boy really excited when he got to use it on his own. As for the blonde clown, he was supposed to be the main tank for his party, and yet he was at the back sitting out of the battle. Judging from his earlier words, Julian sensed that if they kept on hammering physical attacks, they'd be in trouble because of the self-inflicting debuff of bleeding. The long-range archers from the party were making sure to keep the crab at a distance, while our boy wondered what their strategy really was. Even the crab was questioning what the flip these idiots were doing, because clearly none of the attacks were working. The raid process seemed tedious and slow, and thanks to the creature's dense shell, they wouldn't be able to penetrate or injure it with just arrows from afar. Seeing the situation call for his presence, the blonde clown acted like a hero who had come to save the day, when clearly he should have stepped in way earlier. He then casually asked for a buff from one of the chicks. But that's not even the worst part. The worst part was that it wasn't even a real buff. They were just role-playing to increase his morale. If Julian was here, he would probably let the crab murder all of them here. Anyway, our boy waited for their cringe session to end and understood that they were going to need one powerful attack to beat the monster in one go. To his shock, the blonde clown exhibited a special power that he couldn't have anticipated from a carefree guy like him at all. Apparently, it was called Radiant Power, and it was an SS rank skill that applied tons of buffs on the target. Its duration also increased based on the target's personal rank. Julian was the happiest he could be because he'd basically struck gold in a shitty F-rank field with the discovery of this new rare skill. Recalling his conversation from the sales lady who was showing him the equipment armor, he learned that many players liked uploading videos to their channels, so their business decided to prepare items like that too. She mansplained the crap out of the technology, and it flew right over my head as well as Julian's head. Back to the current scene, it turned out his glasses were special and could record footage of the battle. This would later help him to access the skill anytime he wanted. If he could pair Radiant Power alongside the boss's skill, it was going to result in a beautiful and complementary combination of receiving a ton of buffs and raising his stats. He also learned that the S-rank buff skill was coming from the lady, who apparently didn't even know her own worth. Having been empowered by the buff, the blonde decided that it was time to unleash his abilities. First off, though, he asked our boy to hit the boss with some heavy damage attacks. So Julian casually whipped up a gigantic fireball and dealt insane amounts of damage on the crab. And just for the kicker, he'd brought out a trump card skill, especially for this occasion, which activated as a second part of the fireball effect. With the Chan explosion, the guy detonated the same fireball, allowing a chance to increase even more damage. The aftermath of the battle was pretty anticlimactic as the crab was literally cooked to the point they could feast on it now. As for the blonde, he was devastated that Julian stole his moment. Acting like the crab was about to pull off some kind of special move, this guy naively rushed towards the crab to finish it off. The hilarious part was that he was swinging his blade against a creature that was already dead. And instead of having the self-awareness to realize he did something cringe, he was even proud of himself. If neuroscientists somehow got a hold of his body, they would probably find zero brain activity inside his head. Even the party members' faces told you about their reactions. They were questioning what the fudge just happened. Anyway, Julian noticed the sudden change. The skill called Change Resistance from the Mudflat Crab was now officially a part of his arsenal. Now he just needed to return home and use the combined effects of Change Resistance alongside Radiant Power to see what kind of magic he could come up with. With the boss defeated, he just wanted to go home when suddenly the entire group started eyeing him down. They gave him all the credit for having a busted attack skill like that and were indebted to his efforts to carry the entire team of dead weights. Seeing the attention being focused on Julian instead of him, the jealous blonde called them to focus on item distribution instead of wasting time. He was at least glad that the chick was still supporting him strongly until she shattered his heart to a million pieces when she went to fawn over Julian just the same. The group was actually fine with handing our boy the biggest share from the field drop because of his contribution alone. While this was happening, one of the agents observed the situation and the monster corpse. He reported the information back to his leader, explaining how there weren't any item drops from the boss this time, so they'd be focusing on the next spot instead. Meanwhile, Hei's eyes shifted to a different color as she gazed into the sky. Something told me she had more mystery to her than we thought. In the next scene, our boy defeated a bunch of monsters. Clearing the daily quest rewarded him 300 points, but all this effort just to get to level 3 had exhausted him quite a bit. Also, he ended up testing the potential of the two skills by merging their effects at the same time. The buffs were incredible and out of this world, but it came with one glaring problem. Popping open the status window, he reflected that he didn't have enough copy counts to do anything with the effects. Think of it this way. Since both skills were buff skills, what exactly was he buffing apart from his body when he couldn't even use more than 2 copy skills at the same time? The answer was nothing. So that's why this combination was useless until he got his hand on the 3rd copy slot. The tedious process made him whine because our boy just wanted to gather more SP to rank up already. Julian laid there in a field of silence, hoping some kind of miracle would help grant him a special quest to reward him with more points. The dude didn't have high hopes when suddenly the system screen popped out of nowhere with a special tutorial quest for him. The tutorial quest required him to complete the main quest, and its reward would be a whopping 4,000 SP, which was just the amount required to get to rank 3 of his skill. Even Julian was startled and wondered what kind of main quest this would be. Suddenly, his face turned to shit with the sky literally summoning a damn island. This was the new field called the Sky Island Canal, and his main quest was to clear the field. Since it was a special field, it was going to be teeming with monsters, and in this case, they seemed to be aerial monsters. The system required him to clear the special field for the sake of the Earth because its very existence was a threat to Earth. The appearance of the Sky Island was reported all over the country, alarming the people and the members of the User Association. The Player Association was acting under emergency circumstances. All airport flights had also been suspended, and from the experience of the citizens, the only notable effect was they couldn't get enough sunlight. As far as the international situation was concerned, more special fields had begun popping all over the world. For example, Japan's special field was unique, too. A land mass of half a country's size had bound itself next to Tokyo. But in their case, it wasn't a sky island, which was why the Koreans thought they were having it much worse, having to deal with a lack of sunlight, too. Meanwhile, our boy realized that the special field in Japan was even worse. It was a B-class level, and creatures over level 70 were casually toppling Tokyo and unleashing destruction. That meant even one monster was comparable to an S-rank warrior. All of a sudden, it was actually the Koreans who had it easy. At least they weren't getting destroyed by high-level monsters. Since the existence of special fields posed a great threat to humanity and the Earth, the association had requested official support from the government to raid the problematic fields as soon as possible. A strategy was underway to counteract the Sky Island, and all players joining the raid would be awarded with an incredible bounty for their efforts in clearing the field. Julian appeared chill and realized that things had taken a worse turn than he expected. While playing around with the system, he tried to look for a loophole that could perhaps give him more SP without doing anything. He thought he was in some kind of gacha game. Picking apart the quest details, he realized that by the end of the main quest, he'd have more than enough SP to upgrade all of his traits by 1 level each. This actually motivated him even more to help clear the special field. The staff member finally returned to show him the artifact he asked for. Julian popped open the box and assessed its stats using his appraisal effect from the system. Both the cursed ring and bracelet didn't seem to be special. They gave him 100 additional mana, but with a drawback of taking away strength and agility. It balanced it out basically. If Julian went for the set, he'd get about 400 additional mana, which would be a great help to him. Even if his other stats decreased just a bit, he thought playing with magic was the safest bet, so he was okay with that. At the same time, it made him wonder if he should purchase some mid-range armor on top of that. So, he asked for the price, and what do you know? The lady casually told him it was going to require 400 million won. The price was so high, but our boy chose to act cool and professional, walking out like he didn't just suffer a heart attack while hearing the price just now. That's it for today, junkies. Subscribe to Manhwa-kun Recap and stay tuned. The next part is coming soon. Don't forget to comment and suggest what we should cover next.